So, welcome back to another episode of Writing Off the Deep End.
Yeah, I'm Mary.
And I'm Geoffrey.
And we're here to talk about writing.
And science.
Yes, today we've got this really exciting topic, actually. You might have already learned from previous episodes that Geoffrey and I were both practicing
scientists.
Yeah, we have a career in science that predated our lives as writers.
In different areas of science, so that's also interesting.
So maybe to start, Geoffrey, you should describe what kind of science you used to do.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to describe.
So
I'm trained as an astrophysicist. My doctorate is in astrophysics. But I haven't worked in astrophysics for most of my career.
Yeah.
I worked in an area called Geomatics, which is essentially a variation on surveying engineering.
Yeah.
So measuring space, geographic space, city spaces, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But most of the work that I do is concerned with, it's an area that I developed over the course of my career, body spaces. So how people move through space, the relationship between the bodies and the space, and I work with people with disability to redesign the spaces that they live and work in.
Yeah.
And also I work with, for instance, the performing arts to rethink spaces in that context. So it's a variety of different things in relation to space.
It has really changed over the years.
It has changed a lot. I started off working in applications in remote sensing, forests and things like that. So it's shifted a lot since those days.
So I guess since you write far future science fiction, society spread out over multiple star systems and interstellar travel, the link to astrophysics seems pretty clear.
Yeah, and it's nice. It's actually been one of the pleasures of taking up fiction writing is because a lot of the work I did on astrophysics has lain dormant for years in my career, and all of a sudden it got taken up again in my writing, and so I actually have renewed my reading in astrophysics and cosmology in order to support that end of the writing. So
and see how the field's changed, maybe.
And see how the field's
Since you did it
changed.
last.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the more recent work that you've done on spatial relationships and things like that, the link is a little less obvious, but I think still there.
The link with
your writing.
Yeah.
With the work that you've done on the human body, as you say, and how it moves through space. I think that we can see that occurring in your writing. The idea that it is important, how not just the physics of stars and spacecraft, but of humans within the spacecraft.
That's interesting, because when I write, I'm very aware of the body when I write, and I don't know if it's exactly intentional, but I pay attention to the narrator's perspective or the descriptions to make sure that they feel grounded in the body. I don't know if that shows up in the writing, but
I think it does, and I think it's so important. I think there is often a drift towards the cerebral in fiction writing to create characters who are just their heads, just brains on a stick, you could almost say, and I think that's not what we want as writers. We want things to be vivid and sensory and embodied. And so anything that you have to bring it down, you have to put it in.
And I also have a strong emphasis on place in my writing. So that's partly the result of writing science fiction, because in science fiction, the places aren't predefined for you. You have to build them in your mind's eye. You have to build them for the reader, but you have to have them already built in your own mind's eye. Yeah. And so place is extremely important in science fiction to give a good sense of place. Yeah. So let's talk about your work in science.
So I started working in science when I was in undergrad, and I worked in the lab of a scientist who studied marine algae, single-celled algae in the ocean. And I loved it so much I kept doing it in grad school. And so by the time I was doing my PhD, my focus was on any kind of single-celled organism organism that lived in the ocean. And specifically, I was working in the Arctic. I was studying the Arctic Ocean, which is a really interesting place. It's right now in this time of change because of climate change, because of human development, and discovery and exploration, but also people who have lived there for many years. And so these microscopic organisms are, we can track them through the process of what is in fact a worldwide global
So
change.
they're kind of a sensitive tracer
yeah.
of a lot of other things that are going on, right?
They are. So, but they're also really weird and interesting for their own sake. You know, we are multicellular or beings, and we look around us and we see a lot of other multicellular beings, and it's easy to forget that that was a recent development and just a few twigs of the huge, diverse, weird tree of life, right. Most of which is single-celled and incredibly different. You know, two bacteria might using completely different chemical substrates to get their energy. Arguably, they are more different from each other than you and I are from a tree, which both use oxygen and carbon dioxide. So they're interesting in their own right, and then they're interesting in the way that they're fitting into this world. And so that was where I came from. And
how does that intersect with your writing?
Oh, in so many ways. I think, first of all, I was working in a field that has a certain excitement and romance to it. I was going up to the Arctic, which is a place of so many stories. So much has happened there. There's this little edge of danger and excitement when you go up there because it is a hostile environment to human life in many ways. So already I was, from that perspective, I was tapping into interesting, storied history. In a more broad, general way, science affected my writing. I'm an ecologist. I study how organisms are distributed through space. And so I was trained to look at landscapes and space. I guess this is echoing a lot of what you said, but that was my training, to think about setting, to think about the physical and environmental context of things. And I think that has that's something that I also focus on when I'm writing fiction.
Right. And one of the things that strikes one when reading your work is it doesn't feel very... I mean, you do refer to scientific ideas,
yeah,
but it has a very organic feel to it.
Oh, well, thank you. It is definitely a different... a different style of writing and a different style of thinking too, but I think at its root, I mean, we're scientists because we're really excited about what we study, right? We think that something very small that other people might find insignificant deserves a lot of attention, and when you're writing, the same thing happens. Something that other people didn't notice or didn't think about, that nobody is quite so enthusiastic as you, deserves all of this wonder and delight that you're giving it. And so it is expressed in a different way. It is expressed with language rather than figures and numbers. But I think at its root, it's coming from the same place.
So we were just talking a little bit in our break there about our careers in science. So you were saying that you've worked in science for about 15 years. Yep,
and still doing it, still taking contracts to do different kinds of research. I do a bit of field work still, which lets me travel up to the Arctic, which would otherwise be too expensive for me. And just keep my hand in to know what's going on.
So managing two careers at the same time? How's that going?
Well, I've had to watch less TV, but generally good. Always a little frustration. You're behind on one thing, you catch up on it. You're behind on another. I'm never going to be caught up on everything.
But I guess the science does pay the bill, largely, right?
Right now. Right now, science is paying the bill. At least until I get my bestseller published,
Exactly.
you know? Now, you retired from science last year.
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, you haven't?
I'm still. I was thinking of it. I'm still in the game, but I am thinking of retiring.
Okay.
So it will be soon, but
who knows?
but it is two careers, and they until recently they didn't touch. So now they do. Now there are aspects of my writing that are integrated.
Well, that's the most I think healthy way is when they're feeding each other.
Yeah.
And not in competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is a challenge to manage the two different registers, as it were, as opposed to entirely different careers.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling my way into the writing career. We'll talk a little bit more about that another time, about opportunities for writers and the different way networking is different in the writing world than in the science world. Yeah. So there are interesting things that way to explore. So,
for a future episode.
So we've decided to separate the science section into two pieces. So this is the end of part 1, where we went into a little bit about our scientific backgrounds.
It turned out we had a lot to say, though.
And I think we decided to keep it because it is kind of interesting for people, I think. And the next time we'll be talking in part 2, we'll be talking about how we integrate the science into our writing lives.
Yeah. So tune in, subscribe, use the link below to subscribe, and we hope to see you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.